Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I wanted to talk about the Renekton conversation that we're having once again. It's very common, and it's something that deserves a little bit of everyone's time because I think it helps speak to a divide in the community that isn't where one group is right and one group is wrong. But in my opinion, one group is thinking about it more critically than the other. So I'm going to go through what Caedrel wrote, and then I'll present the LS side of things, as at least how I understand LS to be talking about it, and then I'll kind of give some explanation to how I look at things as well, because it's a very complex issue, and neither side is going to present it as a complex issue. So let's just start with his tweet. So Caedrel asks, can you go into more detail as to why Renekton is a bad pick? I think I speak for many pros across the world here in saying that this champ has been one of the strongest tops over the last 2 years in pro play, suits almost every draft, and has very little counterplay in fights. So let's talk about this first. Let's talk about this first tweet, because it's important to realize exactly what Caedrel is trying to say. And I think already you can kind of tell that he's saying some things that he might not actually believe. So let's just go little by little. So one of the strongest tops. All right. One of the strongest tops. Now, Caedrel and LS would have different opinions on what the strongest tops, what that means. Suits almost every draft. LS would definitely disagree. Well, actually, so maybe LS might be willing to concede on that point. So suits almost every draft means a viable option in most drafts. Maybe it's not the optimal choice in a lot of situations, which we'll also talk about later on why that happens. And then last, has very little counterplay in fights. I'm positive that LS would disagree with that point. Because I've talked about Renekton in a lot of my videos as a champion who can always do their job. When they're ahead or behind, it doesn't really matter. And I think that it's true. Renekton can do most of his job when winning or when behind, as long as the game is relatively close. And I think that's really the biggest disconnect between professional players, analysts like Caedrel, who was also a professional player, and someone like LS, who's looking at it from a theoretical perspective, and tries to use it in practice as well. I'm not trying to limit LS's claim. But that's kind of where we're at so far. So let me actually get a note. So we'll say Caedrel said one of strongest tops, suits almost every draft, very little counterplay. So let's move on to the next part. And he has an infographic for this from gol.gg, which I also used for some statistics for this. So he said this champ, especially this year, has been really strong, as well as in season 9 and season 10 across the world. Feel like it does really well into most matchups, which is vague. So it's difficult to say what he really means there. Fits into every topside 3v3, and helps in early Heralds and Drakes, which is true, and nullifies carries in 5 versus 5, and that's just completely false. That last claim is completely false. And then next he says basically nothing, and then he says this champ obviously has its strengths and weaknesses. He agrees that it was a bad last pick in the Vitality game, but in general the champion itself is very powerful in the majority of drafts and is arguably the highest presence top laner in the world for many years for so many reasons. So for so many reasons, he doesn't really give us many actual reasons. Like, he talks about players like it and it does well in most matchups, but he doesn't give specifics, which he wasn't necessarily claiming to give specifics, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then the real reason why he made this post, which is noble, I guess, in some way. Many pros have been belittled and flamed for picking the champ, which I think has been very unnecessary, as it is tried and tested for so long with a lot of success behind it. Regardless, we'll wait for the discussion, blah, blah, blah. So there are a lot of fallacies that Caedrel is kind of depending on in order to make this argument. But before I do that, I want to talk about LS's side of things. So basically, LS has this concept that he talks about called sinning. So sinning in LS's mind, and again, I'm not speaking. I'm not claiming to know what LS. I don't claim to know what LS is talking about more than LS, because I'm sure there's a lot of nuance to the explanation that LS would give. But the way that I understand it is LS thinks of sinning as picking champions that are very, very good in the early and middle part of the game and will eventually get outscaled by team compositions that intend to scale. And there's not much of a counter argument to what LS is talking about, but it shows that we're talking about two completely different things. LS is talking about League of Legends the way that someone would talk about chess. So in chess, there is material. So a pawn is worth 3. A bishop and knight are worth... Or a pawn is worth 1. Bishops and knights are worth 3. Rooks are worth 5. A queen is worth 9. And then a king is invaluable because once the king is taken, the game is over. So in LS's mind, he basically ascribes a relative point value, either knowingly or not. It's probably subconscious, but he thinks of strength in terms of material points. So if Team A drafts an early game composition that's completely sinning, eventually their power level is going to be like 20 to 25 at a predictable point in the game, which is the 20 to 30 minute mark. And then his argument is basically saying, yes, you drafted a team composition that has a good chance to get an early game lead because you all in basically on the early game. You have 5 champions that power spike relatively early, and you're probably going to have a 2,000 gold lead. Let's say that's the most charitable situation that you could project based off of a draft. LS's argument is that if I know that you're going to pick 5 early and mid-game champions, all I have to do is pick 1 or 2 champions that outscale the other team composition, and then the 2,000 gold that you accrued in the early game is going to be outscaled. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about outscaling the enemy team composition. And it's important to bring that into the conversation because it does really come down to drafts and how the drafts play out. So a draft is really just a theory battle. And then the game itself is it's in practice. It's the application of those drafts, and you have to execute it the right way. So a lot of teams just can't execute the right way, which is understandable because some teams are better than other teams. So what I would say up until this point is that personally, you could probably tell by the name of the channel, League of Items, I also believe in the material side of League of Legends, and I think that drafting and the game system side of things is really not misunderstood. It's not even really understood by most of the teams and analysts. Otherwise, you would see teams drafting in different ways. But this just brings up the other restriction, which is drafting itself. So for most people who are watching this video, I know that most of you have like kind of found me because of gambling on League of Legends and DraftKings. But if you watch the actual games of League of Legends, when you're drafting a team composition, there are certain restrictions that you kind of have to follow. So each team gets 3 bans. One team gets the first pick. So you're picking a champion blind. And when you pick a champion blind, the other team can just instantly counter that, theoretically. And that's pretty important. So I actually broke down, this is from the LEC. So if we look at the number of times that a champion was picked, the number of times that Renekton was picked blind, Renekton was picked a total of 29 times. 24 times it was picked blind, meaning they didn't know who the enemy top laner was going to be. And this kind of gives a little bit of validity to what Caedrel was talking about, where most matchups Renekton does fine. So Renekton can be used as a first pick or a blind pick because there aren't many champions that completely dominate the champion in lane. There are champions who beat Renekton, and if teams were more willing to play around like the counter pick against Renekton, then we would potentially have an argument or a counter to that argument. So we'll say very little counterplay, really well into most matchups. So my remark would be most teams aren't willing to try and counter Renekton. And you may ask yourself, why aren't teams willing to do that? And I have a theory about that, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes. So let's just talk about blind real quick. So blind picked 24 times. Renekton has an 11-13 record as a blind pick. On the blue side of drafts, which is where you would expect, basically when you're drafting blue side, you have to blind pick a top laner or a mid laner, which gives red side a counter pick in the 5th spot of their draft. So if you were a team that believed in counter picking, you would be able to counterpick Renekton in a lot of situations if you were the red team. So as a blue team, where you know that you need to blind pick a champion, at least one champion, it makes sense to pick something like Renekton theoretically. But as we see, when you're blind picking Renekton on blue side, Renekton has a win percentage of 36% and a record of 5-9, which is obviously bad. On red side, as a blind pick, and obviously the reason you see this a lot is because with your first 4 picks in the draft, with blue side's first 3 picks in the draft, a lot of the time you get a jungler and then the bot lane, and then on red side you'll get the bot lane and the jungler, and then the red side has to pick one of their solo laners first. So a lot of the times they'll pick something like Renekton in the 4 spot, or they'll pick Renekton in spots 1 through 3, and just hold on to a different pick to try to get different later on in the draft. On red, it's 6-4 with a 60% win rate. Obviously, there's a big difference in those numbers, but 6-4, it's not really a big enough sample size, obviously, to have some kind of like definitive statement that red side is better than blue side. And then when it wasn't a blind pick, when it was a counter, meaning the other team had already locked in their top laner, Renekton was 2-3, which is bad for picking a champion into a counter matchup intentionally. But again, the big difference that I think people like LS and Caedrel don't really take into consideration, which they really should, is was the team the favorite or the underdog going into the match? Now you may ask yourself, why is that relevant? Why does it matter if it was G2 against Mad Lions? Like, Renekton is a good champion. It should be a good champion in every single type of game. So if I'm the underdog and I get Renekton, I should feel good about myself because Renekton has a 60% win rate worldwide or something, which was ridiculous, by the way. Like, Caedrel showing the statistics for all the major regions is pretty stupid. Or for all the regions is pretty stupid. I took a dive into some of those numbers as well. And I'll do that before I do the favorite and dog stuff. So in the LCS, Renekton has a 70% win rate. But if you're a not top 4 team, meaning an underdog in most situations, they're 5-9. So Caedrel's saying Renekton's a good pick. Like, any team can pick it and it's good. It's just not true. Like, if you're a worse team and you pick Renekton, you're probably still going to lose. And it fundamentally changes how you have to go about playing the game. In the LCK, we have a 59.6% win rate, which is obviously very good. In the top 4, meaning Hanwha Life, Damwon Gaming, Genji, and DRX, I think, Renekton is 15-7. So the difference in Korea is that a lot of these teams at the top of the table like playing Renekton a lot and utilize it in the draft and will play around the win conditions of Renekton very well. And then it's 22-10 if you include T1 as the 5th team, because T1 plays a lot of Renekton as well. So that's obviously a very good top lane record for Renekton, but that's where I think the skill of drafting comes in. And then in the LPL, overall, Renekton has a 51.5% win rate. But if you're not an elite team, like a top 4 to 6 team, where you're going to be competitive in the playoffs, Renekton had under 50% win rate, so 17 and 23. And if you want to take a look at those numbers more closely, basically what I did is I went onto Leaguepedia, which has a lot of great statistics for everyone, and then you can just kind of see the breakdown of the players who are playing Renekton, and based off of this information, you can kind of get a good idea of, like, is Renekton picked by favorites more often or underdogs more often? And I did that for each league. So there's the 4 different leagues, and I just eyeballed it for the most part. I did add them up, but I'm not pretending like I had some like ridiculous process to get to this point. So basically, in this sheet, I just have all of the every game from the LEC this season that had Renekton in it as a picked champion, not a banned champion. So there were 29 games. Renekton was 13 and 16 for a 44.8% win rate. His overall KDA was 2.74, which is actually pretty strong. You would expect, like winning players, or winning a good KDA is basically 3 in a win for the most part in a close game. Kill participation 56.1%, which is pretty good. As teams that were underdogs going into the match had a 23% win rate with Renekton, and I think this does a lot. You could use this against LS probably, saying, listen, yes, Renekton is a questionable champion, but if you put a Renekton in a good player's hands, their team is going to win. But League of Legends is a team game, and you need to be able to create draft advantages as an underdog. So in my opinion, the true measure of a good champion is a champion that is picked by underdogs and has a better than expected win rate. So at 23%, if you just took all underdogs on average and said that underdogs were going to win 25%, let's say, that'd be plus 300 on the money line. So if I told you can bet on any dog at any point in time as at plus 300, that's basically what you're doing when you're picking Renekton, and hoping to win that match. Favorites are 10 and 6 for a 63% win rate. Obviously, that's much better. And in my opinion, it does a lot to explain why Renekton is thought of as a very good champion. It's because when good teams play Renekton, Renekton looks good. When bad teams play Renekton, Renekton looks bad, and it's results oriented. LS's argument here would be, oh, well, like, just because you know you're better than the other team and you can pick Renekton and win the game early doesn't mean that it's the easiest way to win the game. It doesn't mean that it's the most reliable way to win the game, which is probably the more accurate way to say that. And I think that he's right. I think that when you get a good team against a bad team, the good team can do whatever they want for the most part. Will they lose sometimes by getting outscaled? Yes. Will that look bad? Yes. If a Renekton is involved, is it going to get blamed? Yes. But a lot of the better teams could be playing that line and feel good about it. At the same time, you could have an underdog say, we think that we're better in the early game than this team that is listed as a favorite against us. We're going to play Renekton. We're going to try to snowball the early game, and we're going to take our chances. I love that approach from underdogs. If you're not as talented as the other team, bring some chaos into the game and see what happens. If you already think you're going to lose most of the time, like, what's the big problem with taking a risk in the pick ban phase? I think teams need to do a better job of realizing how good they are relative to other teams. I think I said that right. So favorites is 10 and 6. On blue side, Renekton is 6 and 10. And like I said, Renekton is the kind of champion that gets picked blind all the time, so it's picked blind on both sides, really. 6 and 10 on blue side for 38%. It was seen a lot as like a first overall pick when Gore Drinker was broken and out of control, which is somewhat reasonable. Red record was 7 and 6. And again, you're picking Renekton as a blind pick on both sides pretty often for very similar reasons. And that is basically it from the statistics side of things. So not statistics side of things, from the numbers side of things, because a lot of these aren't statistics, they're just numbers. So let's go back to the original arguments that they were making and try to put a bow on it. So Caedrel says one of the strongest tops. I disagree. I think that it depends on how you define. Actually, I don't disagree. Renekton is a good top lane champion when you're better than the other team, or when you want to try and snowball the early game. It's a valid way to play the game. And I think that's where the big disconnect is with LS and Caedrel. Caedrel sees, a lot of teams play it, it has a good win rate, it's a good champion. LS is saying it can get outscaled, it gives you a lose condition, not a win condition, it gives you a losing condition. Because if you don't win the early game, you're going to get outscaled, and he's not going to be doing as much for the team. Caedrel's retort to that would be, well, even when they're losing, they can be impactful in a team fight, which I definitely agree with. But to say that it nullifies carries in 5 versus 5 is kind of insane. That's only when you're a really fed Renekton that can go out of control. Because if you're just looking for carry performances, I mean, we've seen Aatrox do really well. We've seen Urgot do really well, where they just completely destroy a match, as well as many other champions. Suits almost every draft. Again, I think that's saying a little too much. It can fit in a lot of team compositions, but it's not the optimal choice in a lot of team compositions. But it all comes back to how we draft, and we draft with the restrictions of needing to pick champions blind, needing to give priority to like building team compositions around 80 carries because it's a more simple way to play the game, which is fine. Like there's the human element of things. If we were all robots playing this game, then I would be more on the side of LS. The fact that it's human on human action, you can definitely see the argument that Caedrel is making about like the good feelings about playing Renekton. How it's like, you're strong in the early game, you build up a little bit of a CS advantage, you go to a Drake fight, you get a couple of kills, you snowball really hard. It's true, that does happen in a lot of games. But the reverse is also true, where it doesn't happen, especially when you're not the favorite. Yeah. Okay. Most teams aren't willing to try and counter Renekton. Yeah, so like if you have a pocket pick against Renekton, you should be trying to do that. A lot of teams just aren't good enough to execute that game plan. Every topside 3v3, it goes at least even in most top lane 3v3s, or topside 3v3s, I'm sure. That's basically it though. It really boils down to LS taking a materialistic look at things, which I think is a very smart way to look at the game. It's underutilized right now. Personally, I think that the items are the thing that really fundamentally changes what champions are viable at any point in time. And if you can identify an item early enough, you can find champions who are very good at using that item or use it very efficiently, and then you'll create a different kind of advantage in the game. But players aren't at that level yet. Coaching is not at that level yet where players are willing to listen to coaches and play around an item win condition. It was almost there a little while when we had like Ardent Sensor being broken out of control, Ginsu's being broken out of control, and I was a big advocate for playing with those items at that time, and they really helped shape the meta. But not every meta is determined by items, because they may not be easy enough to play around. Like I said before, if we could play perfectly, and this is the difference between chess robots and chess and people playing chess, is the same as League of Legends robots and humans playing League of Legends. So if you could play the game perfectly, just like in chess, how you have machines basically calculating moves 20 moves ahead, 22 moves ahead, they can see that deep in the future. We cannot see that deep into the future. Maybe with preparation, we can anticipate a lot of things, and there are a lot of intuitive things that we can kind of understand faster than machines. But just brute force crunching numbers, the machines win every time. I think that's about it. I think I kind of lost it at the end there, but I think it's pretty clear that both sides have reasons But the LS side I think is more reasonable. And ultimately it comes down to, I wonder how many times I said ultimately in this video. I think that the big gap here in understanding is like favorites and underdogs, because I don't care what underdogs pick. And that is probably another thing that Caedrel would say is like, the best teams play it. I want to be like the best teams. I'm going to play it too. I think it's a mistake. But that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you later.